Hi everyone, and welcome to a video podcast that we are doing with myself, Sandeep, head of product at Webtrends Optimize, and I'm joined by, if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
So I'm Steve. I'm head of optimization, working at a company called Conversio. We're a conversion rate optimization agency focused on making clients' websites better through optimization and personalization.
Hi, I'm Nigel. I also work for Conversio. I head up the development team.
Cool. Thank you guys. And we have a very interesting topic today, all around personalization, which in itself probably means many things to many people. And I think that'd probably be a good place for us to start, guys. So, what the bloody hell is personalization all about? Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I think personalization is one of those buzzwords you hear consistently from CEOs all the way through to the businesses of, we work with or want to do personalization, and I don't think anyone really knows what that means and how far that can stretch. Fundamentally, it's getting back to its core. It's serving different experiences, different messages, different content potentially to different user groups. This is very basic and it sounds really easy to do. Let's do it tomorrow. But I think the problem with that is, where do you start? And that's kind of what hopefully we can cover today in our ideas. But yeah, personalization shouldn't be as difficult as I think it becomes in businesses, and as difficult. But yeah, that's my thinking of personalization.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say maybe it's a bit of a sliding scale with regards to the user groups you're talking about. Like at one end of the spectrum, you've got the individual user, which I think some people think personalization needs to be unique to the user. I think in reality it's not. It's more about segmentation and about user groups.
Yeah, I think for us, when we look at personalization, it's almost trying to readdress a very poor way most people have dealt with their websites to date. So when we're running experiments especially, quite often you're looking for a single winner. So you're saying this will be the new general experience that everybody will get. And that's been the way most people have run both experimentation programs, but product as a whole, probably almost forever. And personalization at its core is saying, hey, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe when you have different groups of people who are coming to the site and they could be looking for entirely different things, they could need reassurance in entirely different ways, maybe we should present different experiences to those people. I think at its very core is that same message that you guys mentioned, right? Which is one experience for everyone probably doesn't make sense anymore. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I totally agree with Nigel in the respect of personalization starts wide, user groups, not one-to-one. Everyone's excited about this whole one-to-one personalization. That's challenging, and I think it's where you really group those together and think about the users as groups of people. I mean, from an optimization perspective, we are continuously looking at experiences that potentially impact certain groups. Now that in its own right is almost a type of personalization, and there's data in those optimizations as well that feed into what a different customer set might be doing. Yeah, even if it's mobile versus desktop. I know that's not really what we're talking about from a personalization perspective, but it's looking at groups and it's refining what each of those groups it needs. Everyone's very comfortable with mobile versus desktop. The concept isn't overly different, but it's looking at groups in a different manner for personalization.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we look beyond that, does personalization work for everyone? Should it be everyone should be thinking in this way, or is it more for the kind of very large enterprises where they're sat on a ton of customer data and they have very loyal people who've been using them for many years? If you think of Amazon or Airbnb, who is personalization for?
I mean, everyone wants to personalise because everyone hears all the podcasts about personalisation, all the exciting things that happen in the personalisation world. They get sold a tool that can personalise, and I do think everyone can, to a certain degree, personalise. I do think there is a starting point and a point where you tip into it's the obvious thing to do, and you've got time and you've got resource to focus on personalisation. I think it becomes quite obvious as you're going through your journey. What I'd say in terms of where and when to start, I think the key thing you've got to consider is what resource do you have? Because personalisation does take up an element of resource. It funnels potentially optimization resource into personalisation. So have you got massive issues with your website? Is your website fundamentally flawed for all users at the checkout? Are there bugs and errors firing every single page view? Are there things that aren't working, or experiences that globally you're not happy with on the site, whether that be through data or just that you want to do something different? If you're in that scenario and your resource is tight, fix those things first, because those are impacting everybody on the site who are going through the conversion, going through to the funnels, whatever that might look like for your individual use case. Fix those things first. Then it's moving on to, right, I'm in a good place. The website's foundationally pretty good. There's always room for improvement. I mean, we run optimization programs with companies for years that continuously look for new and exciting ways to improve their journeys. But you get to a certain point where you're foundationally happy with the site, and you can funnel some of that resource, potentially optimization resource or even internal resource, into focusing on personalization, because the groups become smaller. Doesn't mean the opportunity is smaller than focusing on the whole group. Depends what you're trying to do. But I do think it becomes about get yourself, and I'll kind of talk through this quite a lot in this session, is get yourself foundationally happy, comfortable with the data that you've got, because otherwise you're going to be wasting time and energy pumping it into things that just won't do as well from a personalization perspective.
Yeah, you don't need to be a big multinational there and have that level of data in order to. There's no barrier for entry in terms of size. It's more like Steve said, the maturity really. It's about putting the right foot forward first.
I think
I feel like users. Go on.
Sorry, if you were to tie it to the real world, I guess it's this idea of walking into a shop, and if the rails are broken, you trying to work out how to greet people and what the right pair of jeans is almost isn't the right question. It's like, go fix the rails, go fix the lighting if these essential things are broken. If the checkout only works half the time, you've got bigger problems than trying to work out how to greet people. But beyond that, as you say, Nigel, I guess, people probably are sat on more data than they realize. More useful data, I should say.
100%.
Yeah, and some simple personalizations don't really require loads and loads of data, just browsing history maybe.
Yeah, I think as well, I know GA4 gets a bit of a battering across the industry in terms of people not being able to use it, not finding it great, and I think there's different groups of that, and I'm probably in the group and the camp that think it's actually a really impressive movement in the right direction. Google's changed things that makes more people have to pay for it and all this kind of thing. There's lots of negatives that come with it. However, what Google have done is open up a huge data set and the ability to get to much more data than we've ever been able to get to with the likes of Universal. It's much more user focused. It's much more queryable. I would say if you are not putting your Google Analytics data into BigQuery today, start. If you're not going to do anything with it, start getting it into a database, because the longer term benefit of what you can get out of that data, not only just for site performance, but longer term into personalization data is incredible. And that's just a starting point. To Nigel's point, you don't need a huge amount of data to understand key trends around customers' behaviors and purchases across a period of time. And basic GA data will get you a pretty strong way, I believe, in this day and age with GA4, to just start collecting. If you're not, I'm sure everyone that's listening to this is collecting data, but if you're not putting it into BigQuery, get it in as soon as possible.
I guess what sorts of data should you be expecting them to collect would be kind of a reasonable first steps question. When it's get data in, quite often it's like I'm already sending my page views in. We might have e-commerce tracking set up, and so there are things like product IDs and revenue unit, that kind of level of data should be flowing in for most people at a certain level. But what else are they missing, or what should be in there that they don't realize perhaps?
I think from my point of view, again, back to foundations, the e-commerce tracking is an absolutely brilliant foundation. You can understand levels of intent for customers, both in session and user-driven behaviour. If you've got an add to cart set up, you know that there's some level of intent to continue that journey. That might be just adding it to a wish list, for example, but there's a level of intent they're showing you. They're showing you they're interested in their product. They're showing you're interested in your website. It may have dropped out, but they're telling you something. Them viewing a page is telling you something. So even very, very basic, I believe, GA tracking or wherever you're going to set your tracking up, to understand levels of intent through session is a great starting point. Of course, as you move into different business types and sectors, there are going to be different things that you might want to capture that tell you more about the customer, whether that be a loyalty program or or booking a slot in a grocery site. Those things come, but fundamentally, if we're just talking about what are the starting points, a very good, solid, foundational e-com track from start to purchase that tracks over time, that's got a user ID which Google will default have, gives you a real good understanding for today, and also looking back across what that user does across time, which I think is fundamental as you go into personalization.
And just a little bit further on that point, so what are you looking for with all this data flowing into GA4 and BigQuery? Let's say you do have your purchases, you have well-defined events, which I think are quite often the challenge. People might have just generic click tracking on, and you understand here is a URL someone clicked through to, but the semantics of that URL may be lost. But let's say that data is all flowing in for the lens of getting started with personalization. What is it that they're trying to figure out or look for once that data is there?
You're looking for trends. You're looking for trends in user behavior. And this is where there's a shift in mindset from optimization to personalization. They're fundamentally, when we come to this at some point, they're fundamentally the same thing. But you're looking at the user behavior, you're looking at what that user's doing across time. You are looking to group those people into different sections of traffic. This sounds complicated, but to say the data does exist. I'm pretty sure everyone that's got GA4 has this data available to them. May need help getting to the crux of it, but it's there, it's sat there. But I guess an example would be, to my point around, if you've got a loyalty program, it's someone that's got a loyalty scheme, it's someone that shops multiple times with you a year. Can you group those into a segment of customers? What size is that segment? And start to break it into different manners. The idea from our perspective and in terms of setting your foundations on personalization is grouping into a set, maybe of 4 or 5, depending on your business use case and what you're trying to do, of audiences or groups of customer that have key defined goals. You've got the one end that know you really well, they shop all the time, they don't need any help trying to convert, and then you've got the other end that know nothing about you. You've got that kind of scale of user group. Each user group will have different needs, and that's where what you're looking for. What are those groups? What are those? Where do they kind of? What are the differences between them, and what do we need to support them in their journey, either through the website or to make them return to the website?
Can I just say, going back to the point about what data you collect, outside of the journey that they take through the site and the pages that they view and whatever, there's also stuff that you could look at, any filters that they might have applied on a PLP, any sizes they might have selected on a PDP, or anything they've added to basket, any preferences they may have shown with regards to size or style or category or gender, if it's a clothing website or something. You could also look at the search, on-site search history, use all of these things to build up a bit of a picture of what they're interested in when they're on your site as well, because there's a way of segmenting people according to their needs, as well as their behavior and how engaged they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this kind of looks at the data and data prep. It feels like we all agree, at least, that data preparation is a very important first step to personalization. Getting your data in order. The lens feels like it's slightly different. Steve, on your side, it feels like it's very understand who your users even are. So let's try and, build cohorts of people and understand if they do behave in a reasonable, consistent way that's different to everyone else. If it's exactly the same, there's not much you can do with them that's special or unique. If it is different, that at least shows they're after something that is out of the ordinary. They have needs that are different, and therefore we can do something a bit more interesting with them. So I think your lens feels a lot more like defining the people. Nigel, yours, and I guess mine as well, is looking more at how you mobilize. So it's saying, if you were to go and run an experience to these people, what do you need to do? And if you were to think about segmenting people, what would be useful? So Nigel, you mentioned size, for example. Most websites do a terrible job of showing you products that fit you, and people so rarely click on filters, but they will expose their sizes over time. And the thing I hate the most, so it happens so often, you'll express your size somewhere, be it in a filter or somewhere else. The next page you click on, that information's lost entirely, right? So the website's not remembering anything at all about you, despite you being very clear and saying, I am a size XL for this jumper. Okay, but we've forgotten about it the next page that you load. And having a good data strategy where you just pull all of this very useful information into a single concise place that you can look up, I guess is a very important first step. And Nigel, it sounds like you've done a fair bit of this where it's scanning, I think your e-commerce examples were your main ones, right? Where you're kind of looking across a journey and figuring out what you can even tag.
We've done a lot of experiences around the way people interact with filters on PLPs before, both in terms of just trying to make the PLP filters a bit easier, surfacing them a bit more, getting people to interact with them, and remembering as they move through the site, maybe they view another PLP, pre-applying those filters with the option, of course, for them to switch them off and clear them. So yeah, we have done work like that before with our e-commerce sort of clothing clients.
Awesome. I think another very interesting part, and Steve, maybe this is a bit more in your wheelhouse, is justifying the need to personalize at all. And in the world of running experiments, which is the core thing, I guess, that we do with our day, if we were to collect a few bits of segmentable information, so if you're running a test on a PLP, as you say, Nigel, for example, could we just capture what the actual category is that the test is running on and the person's browsed into? If it's a film, could we capture the genre or the artist or the age range? If it's something else, can we capture UTM params and figure out what campaigns people are coming in on? These very easy things to capture up front should allow you to go and segment your results. And again, I guess, Steve, to your point, we're looking for differences, right? So if you were to capture these as part of your test, are these things you would then look at segmenting as well to help with that day one justification of here is why you should personalize? We found someone who hates this, like they need something else, and it's hurting your test. Is that the sort of thing you come across often?
100%. I mean, from a test perspective, you're always looking at, one of the things we do all the time is tracking interactions. Often clients don't have content squares and all the rest of it to tell them exactly what people are interacting on. So we're doing a lot of tracking of interactions and breaking that back. Okay, well, you've got a test to Nigel's point, they're coming into the PLP and they're engaging with filters. That group of customers, that subset of customers, are probably going to behave as very differently to the people that do. Maybe that's conversion, maybe that's AOV, maybe that's page time on page. There's huge wealths of data just in that. Once you've got a test, you've got core data behind that. So everything we do will come back to data, and everything I believe needs to come back to data, whether that be personalisation or optimization. And fundamentally, the reason I always want to start with users and the data is to tell you where to start. Now, it might be that you go down let's just say new customers, because it's an easy one to go, the new customer route, and that they're much more likely to bounce on these PDPs. You now have a piece of insight that you can shift into engagement for new users. It's all about making sure, for me, we know this personalization doesn't have huge teams behind it, and people don't know where to invest the time potentially. The key thing, whether that be using, to your point, in-session behavior around filters and engagement, is there a use case for personalization that will drive additional revenue, additional income, additional, engagement on the site, whatever the KPIs that you are putting behind as a business for personalization. The goal fundamentally is, how do you do more of that? So if we're going after a segment of customers that say 1% engage on filters, let's not look at them. Let's look at someone that is adding to cart. If that's 20%, 15%, there's a bigger group here that we can influence. So the in-session behavior, absolutely, you drive into where the opportunity is, and you need the data for that. And that's kind of the same thing. I agree with you. The views are slightly, where the starting point is slightly different in terms of behavior versus potentially lifetime value. But fundamentally, the approaches are the same. Understand as a good level your data, so that you know where to focus your energy. Because it's very easy, I think, on personalization to go, right, I'm going to do this really cool experience and personalize this for this person that does this on this behavior and shops on a Wednesday. And great, there's loads of cool things you can do on all the tools as there is on Webtrends. But where is the opportunity? As we would do with optimization, look at your data, understand the opportunity area, and personalize it. Is probably the key thing, whether that be by user, by session. It's ultimately this, it's finding the area of opportunity.
Your point feels like it goes back to a core principle of testing almost. Yes, you could show things to people who are cold in London on a Wednesday if you wanted to, but if you can't prove the value of what you're doing there, and for anyone who's ever run an A/B test, being able to prove the value of a segment that's slim is something you wouldn't even try to do.
Yeah.
It's almost not worth looking at as a day one practice, but you're looking for large groups of people who move in a consistent way that's a little bit abnormal, and therefore you've got a group of people who are very well defined that you can go after. I guess that's the key thing for that day one is definition, right? Can we put a very tight circle around someone so we can drag them in a particular way that we want to?
Yeah, fundamentally, and optimization and personalization are the same. Well, at least they should be. We shouldn't be putting personalized experiences live to people that don't work. So you're going to test them all, in theory, hopefully, through a tool like Webtrends. You'll be testing that experience. So you're kind of, it's how you're looking at it. You're obviously looking at segments, and I think it's that balance between what's a segment and what's personalization. Everyone's segmenting their audiences by device and new versus returning. Everyone's doing segmentation, but then we talk about personalization, and I think that's where it's an interesting kind of terminology piece. And segmentation generally is bigger, wider audiences, of course. Doesn't mean you can't personalize for a segment. And as you go, you get thinner and deeper and more insight that you can get closer and closer and closer to one-to-one personalization as you go. But absolutely, optimization, you need to optimize your personalization. It's the same, well, my view at least, is it needs to take the same approach. You hopefully aren't rolling out a big old personalization that you don't test and really hurts your loyal fans. So they are, maybe the starting point is slightly different if you're looking for groups, but they're the same.
Maybe that's the journey through maturity of a client as well, like making these segments a bit more targeted, a bit more defined and smaller. So you start off doing A/B tests that's pretty much site-wide, and then as you learn more about the way people are behaving, you can refine those segments until ultimately you end up at this holy grail of one-to-one personalization. And it's like almost a measure of maturity, maybe, if you have the capacity to do that.
100%. I mean, it, absolutely. You've got to start somewhere, and starting with, I don't know, an experience for a really niche user group that maybe there's a good bit of data there, but is really niche, won't prove the value, and that risks personalization losing its steam. The businesses, I've worked in businesses where everyone's talking about personalization, and we do something, and it's not quite worked, and it kind of loses its steam. Well, why are we putting why have we put 50% of effort into personalization when we could have just put that into checkout optimization or designing a new PDP or whatever? There is only a limited resource, and you've got to focus that energy, to my point at the beginning, on what is the most valuable thing to do, and that the starting point is going to be wide for most people, I think.
Especially for sites with smaller traffic as well, because you're just never going to get a significant result unless you've got a decent size segment.
Yeah, 100%.
So you'll be waiting forever.
Makes sense. And, we've spoken about one-to-one personalization as this kind of holy grail, and I assume scale, this is when we're talking about scale, and it's, how do you serve many, many different types of experiences to many, many different types of people as thin as possible. We see this already with product recommendations, but why is it that personalization isn't quite the same as sticking a carousel on your site and patting yourself on the back and saying, hey, good job, we do personalization now and it's one-to-one, aren't we so great? Like, what are people missing in that conversation?
I mean, product recs are an obvious one, right? They're obvious. You can get to one-to-one person, but just do it. If you've got a tool that can do product recs, do it. Continue to optimize it, of course. Bang the drum on tweaking strategies and all the rest of it, so you can get even better results out of them. But everyone does it. Everyone does recommendations. If you're not doing it, you're missing out, right? We all know recommendations drive more cash, that drive more AOV, get people around your site. They all work.
It's like, do you find it sometimes like a bit of a box ticking exercise? People do the product recs out of the box. They think, there you go. But like, they're not all product recs are equal. Some are quite good recommendations. Others are always the same products, or they're not in stock, or they're not really that relevant. But once they're up there, maybe they're not. People take their eye off them a little bit instead of trying to refine them and modify the strategies or target them better. It's almost like once they're up, people turn their back.
Yeah, they're up there. Hopefully, they've proved value for 2 weeks, and then they're leaving behind, and they've probably not proven that value after the 6 months.
Yeah.
Product recs are personalisation. Well, obviously, Nigel, if they're just using the same projects, they're not. But if they're using a good tool, they should be personalised in the respect of they're showing products that are relevant to that user, whether that be from browser behaviour, purchase behaviour, whatever you're using. They are personalised, and you're getting closer to one-to-one. It's just a bit boring now, I think, really, in where we are with personalisation. Like, recs are, they should just be there. It's about, for me, where personalisation gets exciting and where people get behind it is where it starts to change user journeys, taking pages away for the loyal customers that know all about your service, they know your delivery method, they know what they're going to pay. They don't need all that gumph, they just want to get straight to checkout and go that route. I don't know, new customers need that little bit more nudging, need a bit more USPs. Changing the behaviour to service people that need it, rather than it being, oh, you looked at this yesterday and enjoy this list of products. I think, although yes, recs count, I think, as personalisation and should count as personalisation, I think we need to go further than that now. And that's, I think, where everyone's done recs and should be doing recs today if they aren't already, with hopefully a brilliant tool. It is now, I think, we're in the era of how do we take that further. And everyone's been talking about personalisation for years in this industry, but I think we're in a situation where the tools are capable. The data is now set up in a way that we can get there. It feels to me, and I feel like I've had these conversations for years now. It feels like we are almost at a really good ground level for smaller businesses to start the personalization, ignoring the Amazons and the eBays that have got all this data. We're in a place where the Shopify run accounts can start doing this stuff. But Rex just do it. It's personalization, yeah, but let's do it, then optimize it. Let's do something more fun.
Absolutely. I think quite often the two are confused, and I imagine people who've been selling recommendations over the years have done a very good job of blurring the lines and saying we are personalization, but in principle personalization is a discipline like improving UX on a form. It's a goal that you're working towards, and there are a bunch of things that you can try and research and do along that journey to get you there, like improving navigation for people when you know things about them in a recommendations carousel. So the carousel is almost the what. Personalization is almost the umbrella of the goal. Completely different concepts, but they do have that kind of overlapping thing in that one belongs inside of the other.
Yeah, I think as well, turning recs on that are based on your recently viewed and recent purchase behaviours fine. You can, to your point, it being a strategy, it being a discipline, you can get really smart with it these days with the ability to, and then it becomes personalization. Changing the slot rules based on, product 1 is going to be based on this, product 2 is going to be based on this behavior of the customer. That is where you start to turn it from, I've turned on some carousels that are showing people items that they might like or might not, to personalized behaviors. Even positioning, basic stuff, but positioning of carousels on pages where they show based on landing, UTM parameters, all that kind of thing, because those change carousels into just being a bit boring into being fundamentally more of a personalization tactic.
Absolutely. And I think the principle of personalization that it feels like we all want to get to for sure, is this idea of imagination almost. So stepping away from it just being a carousel, even though there are fun things or interesting things you can do with a carousel that will work. But it's almost the imagination beyond this one very small box on your PDPs, and it's saying if we take the entire website as a whole, most of the time, and this is a really good kind of justifying the use case exercise that most people can do on a day one, is just take any site, take a homepage, and just say, for my well-defined cohort of users, how much of this page is actually relevant to them, and just put red or green boxes around the page. And at the end of that process, what you'll find more often than not is 80% plus of a page is not relevant to that audience, despite them being large enough that they should have an experience that works for them. And you could go and tackle any part of a journey, be it the homepage, be it the checkout. We've run some great tests in the past where you'll say, these are business travelers looking at railway tickets. We know they are. What kind of a seat do you want if you're a business traveler? You want one with a plug and a desk, because you're going to be working, you're traveling in the middle of the day. This is of course how you'll be spending your time, and there's no reason to ask you. You can just make assumptions and skip over all these steps. So I think it's this exercise of imagination that is kind of missing from the conversation of personalization a lot. It's not just one page, it's not just one box, it's looking at the entire journey and every part of every page and saying what's relevant, what isn't, and what do you do about it, I guess. Would that be fair?
Totally fair. I think it comes back to the needs of that person. They are going to be different, whether that be, to your point, a business travel. I think hospitality is a really interesting sector for this. We've done personalization like this before. It's such a different purchase to a traditional e-com purchase. So not only is there needs within the understanding of a basic level, but why you're traveling with kids, you're traveling with pets, there's a huge level of interest there. So no, absolutely, it's about trying to get to the grips of, and this is imagination, ideation comes into play. What do we believe their needs as a user group is? You can obviously deploy user research at this point as well. Do some user research. Really quick ways of doing that these days. For very little spend of running unmoderated tests through user groups based on some data, based on some conditions. Understand the needs of these audiences that you're looking for, and fit experiences and ideation behind that. So think wide. It's endless, to be honest with you. And I think when I think back to when I started trying to personalise in other businesses, it's the endless opportunities that almost throw people sideways, and then you end up back on what the thing that you can do, which is Rex or a banner with someone's name on it, which is fine, but you end up there because the possibilities are so endless, and that's why you need to get to a focus point, a focus group or focus goal or whatever it is, so that you can align behind it, well, as a business, as an agency, whatever, so that you're trying to achieve something, rather than just getting lost in everything. But it's just finding that need, and attach a KPI to it, seeing how if you're doing good or bad.
Makes sense. I think that more or less covers the key things that we wanted to talk about as far as getting started with personalization is concerned. We've been through what is it, and just putting some color around that to begin with. but also then, how do you get started, data, but from a couple of different perspectives and viewpoints on the data, justifying the use case, and of course the big wide world of what you could then do once those initial day one things are in check. I guess, were there any other final points or principles you guys want to get across around personalization and that kind of getting started bit that, yeah, people could do with knowing or thinking about?
I just wanted to say, like, in terms of actual steps, if the first step is about data collection, it would start with an audit. I'm not sure if we sort of mentioned the actual practicalities of that, what that step looks like. But you'd have to do an audit to check that you're collecting everything that you can be collecting, but also you need to verify that data. Just so many times I've seen people setting up events and just like blindly trusting them, and then like way down the track you realize that in certain scenarios the events aren't firing, or maybe they're firing twice and you're not accounting for them. So definitely like sense check all of that data first, because it's the foundation that you're going to be working with, and if you miss anything at that stage you might not notice until you've wasted a load of time. Yeah, just wanted to make that point really, and make sure that you're compliant if you're going to start to collect loads of data and you're not doing it already.
Become compliant if you're doing it already.
Yeah. Yeah, just that point really I wanted to make. But I think we did a good job of covering most things.
Cool. And Steve, was there anything? It looks like your audio may have cut out.
My computer decided to mute me, so I'm sorry. Got a nice little gap out of that. So yeah, I mean, I agree with Nigel. Make sure your data's collecting well, compliantly. It's not broken. I'm going to bang the drum again for getting it somewhere. That could be GA4 into BigQuery, that could be whatever platform you're using. Making sure you can access it and break the data down. Don't just rely on the UI of whatever tool you're using. If you can get it into a database that can be queried by someone with the skill set, great. I mean, let's not forget as well, we're in a world with AI and ChatGPT and that can write SQL queries for you now. Although absolutely we want to get people really great analysts, you can get to data these days so much easier just by pulling on AI tools and what have you. So I'm absolutely banging the drum again by getting it into a format that you can query as quickly as possible, because that's how you get to break foundation groups. But I think I think for me, it's the thing I'd say is get your foundations, get something to start on, and then the possibilities are endless and ongoing. It's no different to an optimization journey, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if I were to leave someone with something as well, it would be that, getting started, going from 0 to 1 is almost more painful than going from 1 to 10 when you're kind of getting moving. But it is easier now than it has ever been to capture good data, to make sense of it, use ChatGPT to write queries, as you say, Steve. There is so much you can do in a very short period of time. And it's easier than ever, so there's no good reason not to start looking at these things. And on the flip side of it, the biggest uplifts I've ever seen are from personalization projects, where you're increasing conversion by 30% for people who just had a shockingly poor experience before. And because you're able to put a box around them, you could do something about it. So, yeah, absolutely. I think getting started should be the focus. And on that point, this podcast was kind of a teaser for a future event that we're looking at between both ourselves at Webtrends Optimize and the guys at Conversio. The idea of the day will be a personalization sprint, which I saw as a thing that you guys wrote, and it just sounds so perfect for what we want out that day, where we can fire up some real brands, solve these problems together. So go look at the data, go look at tagging, go look at ideation, and within a given day basically cover everything anyone would need to understand as far as practice is concerned for how you can get moving with personalization. So if this kind of a day feels useful, helpful, relevant to you, give us a shout. We will be advertising exactly how you can sign up and get involved on the day, whether it's to be a guinea pig and walk away with a bunch of great ideas, or just to take part in general if data and sharing and that kind of thing is a bit more challenging. So yeah, just from ourselves and the guys at Conversio, look forward to joining you on that future event if what you've heard here has been helpful.
Second that. It's been good talking. Hopefully we've said something of interest and use. It's a fun topic and it's very wide ranging, but good to talk it through.